All right, we are back on Morning Line. Nick Barris here, along with Clint Kelly. We're coming to you live. This is live. We're on the plus, and you see the number on the screen there on the monitor. I'm looking at the monitor in the studio here. 737-7587. He's a malpractice attorney. We can take your phone calls if you want to jump in. Some folks have called in questions or comments about a case you might have or just wondering about the law. Let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Dick.
Hey, Joe.
I just want to give Mr. Kelly a shout out for giving us all this good information on malpractice and the legal end of it. And one other quick thing, this is National Nurses Week, and a lot of people don't realize nurses, especially working in hospitals, working 12-hour shifts, sometimes on saddle with maybe 10 patients or more, take care of, so they're pretty stressed out, pretty stretched out and stressed out. But that being said, stay out of a hospital if you can. One other thing right quick. Most people don't, Mr. Kelly knows, I'm sure, nurses have to carry malpractice insurance, just like a doctor does. Huh. So, you know, they catch a lot of things that doctors miss. So I just want to, you know, give the nurses a shout out too.
Thank you, Joe. How about that? I mean, and you've talked about nurses before. They're taking on more and more of a burden. And there's some wonderful nurses, but sometimes you wonder, shouldn't the doctor be making this call?
Yeah, the nurses are becoming really the front line of medical health care services. Yeah. That they are people that are taking on more and more responsibility as the system tries to gear itself to reap more profits. What's the best way that you do that? You are able to have lower tier people. When I say that, I mean people who make less than doctors, providing services to more patients, but you keep the charges the same.
Right. That
increases the bottom line. There are some hospital chains that are notorious for reducing the nurse to patient ratio, such that nurses are providing more care to more patients and having difficulty doing it in a competent way. And that's not going to change. And in particular, I'm glad Joe mentioned this, because nurse practitioners you're going to see are more and more involved and responsible for carrying out day-to-day decisions that were traditionally reserved to medical doctors. And this is going to happen on a broad scale across the country, regardless of what happens to Obamacare. This is where healthcare is going right now, because it is the way to maintain the profit that the hospital chains want to keep.
Right, right. So, well, with the nurses, and they do a great job. He just mentioning that in the long hours they work. There was something I saw in the news just recently about interns, you know, the young doctors coming in, and the law was passed allowing them to work like these 24-hour shifts or some crazy long shifts. And I was just thinking, if I'm a patient going into emergency when there's one of these young up-and-coming doctors there under an attending on their 23rd hour,
right?
And that's always been that way. They have these young doctors pushing through unbelievable hours.
It used to be 36.
It used to be, and I don't understand, as part of that training with sleep deprivation and how you perform under that, when you have patients who could really need help and you could make a mistake when you get tired.
Well, first of all, it was slave labor for all intents and purposes, because these people don't earn hardly anything. Right. The interns and residents earn a fraction, tiny fraction of what the attending physicians make. But beyond that, the idea was that if we put these people in stressful situations, they will learn better as part of that tradition or that code. Secondly, the idea was you can have greater continuity of care if you've got the same doctor there for a longer period of time. But the downside, of the major con to that whole situation, is just what you said. Do you want to have a life-threatening illness and catch that doctor on the 23rd hour? Well, of course you don't.
Heck no. I'm sure there have been cases that have come out of that. Probably.
Absolutely. You want somebody fresh, and most of your nurses work 12-hour shifts. Yeah. They'll work them usually 3 times a week, but they may have them back-to-back. And so, you know, when you catch that nurse on the 11th hour of that 12-hour shift, where she's having to make sure she gives the right medication, or she has to make sure that she's evaluating the patient's status in order to determine whether to get a medical evaluation, you want a fresh face.
Yep. I'm with you. I simply don't understand why they do it that way. Let's go to Laura. Laura, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Laura, how can we help you?
Yes, I wanted to ask about the statute of limitations.
Okay.
First of all, and then the second of all, my mother came from the hospital 4 years ago into an assisted living facility that had a locked dementia unit. She was supposed to have been given antibiotics. I got the antibiotics, took them there. She was only there a couple of weeks and she passed away. I secured the records from the facility and found that they had never given her the antibiotics, and she passed away from pneumonia.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's the case, but it was 4 years ago.
Okay, now, well, go ahead. And could it be if she only recently discovered this and was led to believe otherwise? I don't know. What do you think?
There's a couple of issues going on. First of all, the statute of limitations is 1 year from the date that the patient discovers the injury.
Okay.
So whenever that discovery is made, the clock starts ticking.
Would that be when she discovered that she wasn't given antibiotics?
Correct. Now, here's the problem with 4 years. We have another statute called a statute of repose, which is a way in which the doctors and the hospitals have protected themselves even more so, where they say if you don't bring your claim within 3 years of the negligent act, regardless of when you discovered it, you got no case.
Oh, wow.
From what Laura's telling me, I would suspect that she has no case because she's beyond the 3 years.
When did you, by the way, just curious, when did you discover that they did not give her the antibiotics? Was it?
Well, I requested the records within a week after my mother's death.
So
I'm a retired nurse, so I wanted to go over the records and find out what happened to her, because the morning before her death, they called me and said that they found her laying behind the bed. I took her to the emergency room. The doctor wanted to know if she had hit her head. The charge nurse would not answer the question. She wouldn't call the doctor back for an hour and a half because they were going to do a CT on her head, and they didn't want to do it unnecessarily. But I guess they were getting their stories together from what is my opinion.
Laura, why didn't you go see a lawyer about this?
I called numerous lawyers. And I told them the story, and everyone said, well, you know, it's really hard to prove something like that, and no one would take the case. So I just dropped it, and I was, you know, grieving for my mother, and I thought, well, I guess I'm just not going to, I'm not up to this, so I just let it go.
I'm so sorry. Now, lawyers aren't going to turn away if they think they have a money-making case. Now, Clint, for you to ask that means you thought there was some interest. And Clint obviously could see some things maybe that others don't, but if she had gone right after, and she has proof that they were supposed to give her antibiotics and didn't, and then her mom died of pneumonia, I mean, how is that not a case?
There are some reasons why it may not be a case, but this is a good time to bring this up.
Okay.
I'm a board-certified medical malpractice specialist. This is what I do. I have to take tests. I have to have oral examinations. I have to have a certain amount of jury trials that are medical negligence cases in order to be certified in Tennessee.
It's your specialty.
Correct. The question I have is, did Laura get in touch with any of those people, or did she simply call lawyers out there who advertise on their website they handle medical malpractice cases but have no idea what they're doing?
Yeah, but they also take car crash cases and divorces while they're at it.
Whatever else.
Right.
You know, you cannot do this work and not be a specialist, in my judgment. You have to be able to handle these cases on a regular basis to understand not only the medicine but understand the legal technicalities associated with it. And the reason I'm saying this to Laura and people on the show is, if you think you have a medical negligence case, if you believe that you or family member's been injured, find a medical malpractice specialist like me to make the decision whether you have a case. Because if you wind up going to some Tom, Dick, and Harry lawyer who doesn't know what he's doing, you may get an analysis just like that. If somebody said, well, I don't think you got a case, when that person has no idea.
Yeah, yeah. And you're saying that maybe there were reasons, maybe she did go to a one who handles it more, but this is one you would have looked into.
I would, and of course she did call around. She was smart enough to know I need to go get an opinion. But whenever something like this happens, you need to pick up the phone and make a call. The call is free. patient doesn't pay anything unless there's a recovery. But make a call and say, look, I think I have a case here. There's been serious injuries or a death. I want somebody to take a look at it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for her loss under that circumstance. It's interesting you said, I had forgotten about that 3 years, or within 3 years. Now, had she discovered this within a year later, but didn't discover it till a year later, then it could have still been a case.
Sure, even 2 years after that, perhaps, if because it's within the 3-year period. But once you get outside 3 years, 99% of the time, you're not going to have a case.
Okay, and what is your recommendation for someone, anyone who watches this show knows who they can call, but if it's someone like her and it's hitting them for the first time and they're not really familiar, they just think lawyer. When you look, how do you know whether someone has the specialty like you do? When you're right, other ads will say, well, we handle malpractice, or we'll do personal injury, we can do divorces. How do you know if someone has the specialty that you have?
You can type in medical malpractice specialist, Tennessee. There's a website in Tennessee that actually provides the names of people who are specialists. And you can look and see if the lawyer advertises that do medical malpractice, look to see if that lawyer is actually board certified. It's like going to a doctor who claims to be a plastic surgeon but isn't board certified. You want to see that board certification to know that that person has gone through the proper training and has the expertise to call themselves a board certified surgeon. Just like I have the expertise to call myself a board certified medical malpractice specialist. That'll usually be on the website, or you can call the lawyer and say, are you a medical malpractice specialist? Are you board certified? They'll tell you.
And again, those are the only cases you do. Someone walks in and says, Clint, can you help me with my divorce?
No. No, I mean, I don't. I mean, I would send them to a family law specialist.
Okay, we'll take a break on that note. And I do hear divorce attorneys, they do okay financially, but boy, what a headache. Who wants to sit there and listen to two sides complain about their, am I right?
Somebody's got to do it, Nick.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, all right. The number is 737-7587 is the number. If you want to join in the conversation, a question about a case, we're talking with malpractice attorney Clint Kelly. Your chance to get some free legal advice. Join us right after this.